What if I told you that Hollywood's most explosive courtroom drama just twisted into something no one saw coming? What if Blake Lively's legal fight against Justin Baldoni suddenly introduced a brand new mysterious accuser whose name was kept hidden, redacted from public view, fueling speculation that this case is less about justice and more about a dangerous game of power, control, and reputation? Tonight, we uncover the shocking updates, the hidden motives, and the media manipulation that are leaving fans stunned and insiders whispering that this trial could shatter more than just careers. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to reveal changes everything. The courtroom battle between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni has taken yet another unexpected and dramatic turn, and it is the kind of revelation that immediately sets tongues wagging across Hollywood, because when a declaration lands in court documents with the name of the so-called witness completely redacted, it is no longer just about the facts. It becomes about the perception, the headlines, the carefully orchestrated leaks, and the way both camps are fighting, not only in front of a judge, but also in front of the entire world. Now, what makes this new development so shocking is the claim that Justin Baldoni engaged in verbal abuse against an unnamed person. And while those words alone sound damning, the truth is we still have no idea who this person is, what their relationship to the film or the production might be, and what exactly constitutes the alleged abuse. Was Baldoni raising his voice in the heat of directing a scene? Was he clashing with crew over deadlines and budgets? Was he in a personal moment of anger that someone witnessed? Or was this all simply an interpretation blown out of proportion in the high-stakes pressure cooker that is a Hollywood set? The ambiguity is both intentional and strategic, because by leaving this name hidden, the suggestion becomes larger than the substance. The claim becomes a cloud hanging over Baldoni without giving him or the public a chance to understand or rebut the details. And this is exactly the type of move that Blake Lively's legal team seems to be leaning into with precision. They know that when a redacted name appears in a declaration, it creates an air of mystery. It invites speculation, and speculation in the media can often be more destructive than hard facts. Ever could the most dangerous question in the court of public opinion is who, and when you leave that unanswered, you allow every possible guess to float into the narrative. Could it be someone as high profile as Ryan Reynolds, who is closely tied to the production and to Blake? Could it be Colleen Hoover, the author of It Ends With Us, whose reputation would add weight to any claim? Could it be a low-level intern who had one bad day on set that has now been magnified into a legal weapon? Nobody knows, and because nobody knows, every possibility feels dangerous. And that is precisely why this maneuver feels more like a pressure tactic than a pursuit of truth. For Baldoni, this is a nightmare scenario, because while he can deny the claims, he cannot confront them without knowing the identity of the accuser. It is like fighting a shadow punching at thin air while your opponent smiles from the sidelines, and this tactic works not only in the courtroom but in the headlines, as TMZ was quick to run the story, framing it as yet another negative mark against him. The timing was also suspiciously aligned with other filings, suggesting that the leak came directly from Lively's camp, which if true shows a pattern of using the media as an extension of the courtroom strategy. And when you step back to look at the bigger picture, this fits perfectly into the overarching plan that seems to be driving Lively's approach, because every new headline, no matter how thinly sourced, digs deeper into Baldoni's public image, painting him as volatile, difficult, and potentially dangerous. And whether or not the evidence ever reaches a jury, the damage to his reputation may already be done, because the court of public opinion moves much faster than the legal system ever could. Now, what makes this even more compelling is the expert commentary that has already weighed in. Voices like Not Actually Golden have pointed out that in the United States, the rules of evidence are clear and strict. You cannot simply bring in prior bad acts or vague accusations to prove the current case. That kind of propensity evidence is not admissible except in extremely narrow circumstances, which means that if this redacted witness is supposed to testify about some unrelated negative interaction with Baldoni, it is highly unlikely that it would ever be allowed in front of a jury. In fact, the law is designed to prevent exactly this kind of tactic, because it is unfair to judge a person on what they might have done before, instead of what they are specifically accused of in the present case. And yet, despite this legal barrier, Lively's camp appears confident enough to tell TMZ that this witness will in fact testify, which raises the question, do they really have something explosive? Or are they bluffing, knowing that the media coverage alone is worth more than the courtroom value if you believe Not Actually Golden and her sharp analysis? The latter is far more likely because if this witness truly had damning information, it would have been included clearly in the sworn affidavit instead of being teased out in this vague and theatrical way. And that brings us to the strategy that may actually be unfolding here, a war of attrition, where the goal is not necessarily to win the case outright, but to bleed the other side dry financially, emotionally, and reputationally by dragging them through headline after headline, accusation after accusation, redaction after redaction, until they either break under the pressure or settle to make it all stop. And this is why so many are beginning to question whether Lively's approach is about justice or about control. Because the timing, the leaks, the redactions all point to a campaign carefully designed to maximize pain for Baldoni and minimize accountability for the accusers. And while Baldoni may not be perfect, no one on a high-stress set ever is the absence of clear evidence makes this entire maneuver feel more like theater than testimony. And yet the danger remains because perception in Hollywood can kill careers faster than any judge ever could. And as this trial grinds forward, the mystery of the redacted witness looms larger than the actual facts, becoming a character in its own right. A ghost in the machine that haunts every headline, every speculation, every whisper behind closed doors. And the longer that ghost remains unnamed, the more powerful it becomes, casting doubt not just on Baldoni, but on the entire process that has brought us here. As the days roll on and more filings hit the California court system, the story only deepens, and every new page feels like another twist in a thriller, because after the reveal of the redacted declaration, attention immediately shifted to Blake Lively's response to the Perez Hilton motion. And this is where things get even more layered, because what Lively's team is demanding is not just bold, but also potentially dangerous to the future of journalism itself. They are asking for Perez Hilton, also known legally as Mario Lavandera Jr., to reveal his sources to hand over the names of the individuals who have been providing him with insider information about this case. And at first glance, some might think this is just a natural request in discovery, but in reality, it cuts to the heart of journalistic privilege and the First Amendment. Because in the United States, journalists have the right to protect the identities of their confidential sources. And for good reason, if those protections are ever pierced, it would send a chilling effect across the entire media landscape, silencing whistleblowers, discouraging leaks, and ultimately keeping the truth buried under layers of fear and intimidation. And so what we are witnessing is not just a fight between celebrities, but also a fight over whether the courts will respect the long-established protections of the press. Now Perez Hilton himself has become something of an unexpected player in this saga because for decades he has been one of the most notorious names in entertainment news, known for both controversy and longevity. And now, after weathering storms of his own, he finds himself in a position where his coverage of this case is not just entertainment, but potentially evidence in a legal battle. And Blake Lively, by targeting him directly, seems to be attempting to cut off the flow of information that has been damaging to her reputation. Because if Perez Hilton is forced to name his sources, those leaks dry up immediately, and the narrative control swings back to her side. Yet as tempting as that may be for her team, the law and precedent are stacked against her because courts have repeatedly affirmed that compelling a journalist to reveal their sources is almost always off limits, except in the rarest of circumstances where there is no other way to obtain crucial information and where the public interest outweighs the need for confidentiality. And in this case, it is hard to see how knowing who whispered what to Perez Hilton would ever meet that standard. Especially when the heart of the trial is about harassment and retaliation, claims not about media leaks, and yet the move itself, even if unsuccessful, creates another set of headlines. And again, that may be the real goal, because once the filing hits the docket, TMZ and other outlets can run with the story. Blake Lively is fighting back. Blake Lively wants answers. Blake Lively is on the offensive, and that kind of narrative can reshape the way the public perceives her role in this drama, from defensive plaintiff to aggressive truth seeker. And whether or not the judge ultimately shuts down her demand, the publicity value is already cashed in this dual-track strategy of legal maneuvering and media manipulation is something we have seen before in high-profile cases, but rarely with this much intensity and rarely with this much at stake, because the outcome does not just affect the two people in the courtroom. It ripples outward to touch the careers, reputations, and futures of everyone around them, from Ryan Reynolds, who cannot escape speculation about how involved or uninvolved he may be, to Colleen Hoover, whose book has been caught in the storm of its film adaptation to Perez Hilton, who suddenly finds himself defending the very principles of free press in a case he was never a party to in the first place. And that is what makes this entire situation feel less like a trial about specific claims, and more like a chess match where every move is calculated for maximum damage and minimum accountability. And yet beneath all of the spectacle, there remains a nagging truth. We still have no direct evidence of Justin Baldoni committing any misconduct that rises to the level described by Blake Lively's filings. No clear testimony, no corroborated reports, no smoking gun. Just a series of vague accusations, redacted names, and high-profile distractions that keep the headlines flowing, but leave the core question unanswered: did anything happen on that set that truly warrants this level of legal escalation? And if the answer is unclear, then why has this case consumed so much oxygen? The answer may lie in the fact that reputational damage is the real battlefield here, because in Hollywood, perception is everything. And when perception shifts even slightly, it can mean the difference between a career that flourishes and one that evaporates overnight. And for Blake Lively, keeping Baldoni under a cloud of suspicion may be worth more than any courtroom victory, because if he emerges from this case branded as difficult, abusive, or unstable, the opportunities that once came easily may suddenly vanish, and that in itself becomes a form of victory regardless of what the judge decides. And yet this tactic carries its own risk, because the more the strategy becomes transparent, the more people begin to question her motives. The more they begin to wonder if this is truly about justice, or if it is about vengeance, control, and the preservation of her own image in a Hollywood that can turn cold in an instant. And as commentators like Not Actually Golden have highlighted, the cracks are already showing, because when a team leaks to TMZ that a witness will testify, knowing full well that such testimony may never be admissible, it begins to look less like confidence and more like desperation. A last-ditch attempt to keep the pressure on when the legal ground beneath them is eroding. And if that perception grows, then the very tactic designed to destroy Baldoni could boomerang back onto Lively, painting her not as a victim, but as a manipulator of the system and the media. And that is why this case has gripped so many, not just because of the names involved, but because it feels like a test of how far the machinery of celebrity power can bend the legal system and the media ecosystem to its will, and whether at the end of it all the truth will even matter, or if it will be drowned out by the endless noise of spin. As the spectacle grows, what becomes most haunting about this trial is not just the mystery of the redacted witness or the tug-of-war over Perez Hilton, but the way every piece of the puzzle feels like it is being used to shape a narrative rather than reveal the truth. And that is why the question of credibility looms over everything. Because when a declaration arrives in court with the name blacked out, it forces the public to imagine possibilities. And in imagination lies danger, because once people start speculating, there is no way to contain it. And that speculation becomes reality for many, whether it is true or not. And that is precisely the weapon that seems to be in play here. Because credibility is not about what is real. It is about what people believe. And if enough people believe Baldoni is volatile, then opportunities vanish. If enough people believe Lively is manipulative, then sympathy shifts. And in this balance, careers, futures, and reputations hang by a thread. And yet when we look at the evidence itself, the silence is almost deafening. Because for all of the filings and all of the leaks, we still do not have one clear voice stepping forward, unredacted, willing to testify on the record that Baldoni crossed a serious line on set. And in the absence of that clarity, what we are left with are shadows, whispers, and strategies. And that should terrify anyone who values truth, because it means the system is being used not to prove facts, but to bend perception. And this is why the commentary around this case has become just as important as the filings themselves. Because legal analysts, former lawyers, and sharp voices like Not Actually Golden have been pulling back the curtain, exposing the way this game is being played, reminding the public that in the United States, propensity evidence is not permitted, reminding us that vague accusations from unrelated incidents cannot simply be paraded before a jury, reminding us that this entire drama may collapse under the weight of its own theatrics once it actually reaches trial. But until that moment, the damage continues to spread. Because perception does not wait for a verdict. And so Baldoni remains trapped in a limbo, where he is accused but not confronted, targeted but not able to defend himself against specifics. And this is the cruelest kind of trap because it allows the story to linger indefinitely, feeding headlines without resolution. And in that sense, the case begins to feel less like a legal process and more like a media war staged on the battlefield of public opinion, with carefully timed leaks and dramatic filings serving as the artillery. And while Baldoni fights to preserve his career, Lively fights to preserve her image, and each side believes the other must be destroyed for them to survive. And the collateral damage grows larger by the day because every new development pulls in new names. Ryan Reynolds whispered about in speculation Colleen Hoover dragged into the orbit of the adaptation, Perez Hilton forced into a fight he never asked for, and even fans divided into camps that see either a villainous Baldoni or a scheming Lively, when the truth may be far more complicated and far less cinematic. But the reason this feels so cinematic is because Hollywood itself is at the heart of it, and Hollywood thrives on spectacle, on stories that feel bigger than life. And here the line between reality and performance has blurred so much that it is hard to tell whether we are watching a legal trial or a scripted drama designed for maximum intrigue. And the chilling part is that both may be true at the same time. And what happens when the system meant to deliver justice is used as a stage for performance? What happens when the filings become scripts, and the declarations become plot twists, and the leaks become cliffhangers? We are left in a place where truth itself is compromised. And that is why this case has drawn so many eyes, because it feels like more than just a lawsuit. It feels like a referendum on the way fame, power, and the media intersect to create realities that may have little to do with the facts, and yet shape lives all the same. And in the middle of it all sits Baldoni, who by many accounts has never had a single official complaint of harassment or retaliation filed against him until now, who by reputation has been described as thoughtful, compassionate, even idealistic, and yet now finds himself painted as a monster in the court of headlines. And whether or not the jury ever hears the details, that stain may never wash away, because perception once fixed is almost impossible to erase. And that is why every moment matters, because every leak, every declaration, every TMZ headline shifts that perception slightly. And over time, those shifts accumulate until the story hardens into a narrative that no verdict can undo. And for Lively, the calculation may be cold but clear. If she can ensure that Baldoni walks away from this case tarnished, she wins regardless of what the judge says. And that is what makes this fight so unsettling, because it is not about facts. It is about survival. And survival in Hollywood has never been about truth. It has always been about narrative. And so we arrive at a moment where the questions matter more than the answers, because the answers are still hidden, sealed, redacted, or deliberately obscured by strategy, and the questions themselves carry the weight of destruction hanging over both. Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, like a storm cloud ready to burst at any second. What happens when those black bars are finally lifted? Who will the mystery witness turn out to be? And why has their name been hidden so carefully? Is it to protect their safety? Is it to preserve credibility? Or is it because the truth behind that identity could unravel the very foundation of this case? And if Perez Hilton is dragged into the fight, if subpoenas force him onto the stand, will his testimony solidify one side or expose the entire thing as an elaborate manipulation? We do not know yet. But what we do know is that this case has already done damage that cannot be undone. Reputations have been stained, friendships have been tested, Hollywood alliances have fractured, and the public has been left questioning whether anything they see is real or just another performance. And as the filings grow thicker and the headlines more dramatic, one thing becomes painfully clear. This battle is not ending. Quietly, it will explode either in a courtroom with testimony that shocks everyone, or in the media with a bombshell leak that shifts the entire narrative. And until that moment, the suspense only grows, because this is no longer just about two celebrities locked in a fight. It is about the system itself, about how power, fame, and perception can twist justice into something unrecognizable. And that is why the world is still watching, waiting breath held for the next revelation.